position that Notre Dame is right now at linebacker recruiting. This is a position that, to me, in the 2022 class, is an absolute must for Notre Dame. Not only do they need numbers, I think they need at least 3. I think you can make a case that they need 4 linebackers in this class, but they need impact talent. I mean, you look at the last 2 years, Notre Dame really has only signed 1 linebacker unless Keanu Kia decides he wants to not go on his mission and enroll at Notre Dame. But even then, you've signed 2 linebackers in 2 years. None of the linebackers in the 2019 class have really panned out just yet. Doesn't mean they won't. It just means just yet. And the 2018 class is going to be gone. Most of it's going to be gone by the time this class shows up. So striking out a linebacker in 2020 and then only signing Prince Colley, who's outstanding, by the way, in 2021 means you need numbers and you need talent in the 2022 class at linebacker. Notre Dame already has Nolan Ziegler, who I believe is a very underrated player. He's finally been bumped up. I believe he's now a consensus 4-star recruit. When he first committed, I believe he was a consensus 3-star recruit. I graded him out as a 4-star. That's starting to change now that people have watched his junior film in Michigan. Really like Nolan Ziegler. That's a great place to start. Right now, Notre Dame is also, I would argue, the leader based on the sources I've talked to for Josh Burnham, who's a linebacker from Michigan. Now, when it comes to kids like him, until he commits publicly, I'm not going to feel great about it, just because those in-state kids we saw with Braden McGregor, there was a lot of people thought he was going to go to Notre Dame. He ended up going to Michigan. For me, I just want to see him pull the trigger first. Now, if he does, great pickup. I really like Josh Burnham. He's a raw kid. He's 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", listed as both. Tremendous wingspan, incredibly long arms. Right now, he's just a raw football player. He's not a really technically sound guy. He's a prospect that, in my opinion, needs a lot of coaching, but you can't coach some of the things that he has, which is great length, really athletic player, really good feet. You can see him at quarterback when he's running the ball. He's a powerful, athletic young man. He just has to learn to be more of a linebacker. And that'll come in time, and obviously as he gets more experience playing linebacker and gets good coaching, which I think he'll get at Notre Dame, should he pick Notre Dame, which again, as I'm saying, is not a given yet. I feel really good about where Notre Dame is right now, but we need to see it. So I like where they are there. I think Notre Dame is, in my opinion, based on my sources, the leader for junior Tuihalamaka, who's a middle linebacker from California, another guy that I absolutely love. He's only about 6'1.5", but he's thick. He's physical. He's got really good length beyond a normal 6'1" guy, but he's a thumper in the box. He's got some range to him, so he's not just a B gap to B gap middle linebacker. I think he's smart in coverage, and I think he's a guy that could also be a bit of an edge rusher. He could be a drop type of player. He reminds me a lot in that regards of Jordan Botelho. So there's certainly some flexibility to what he could bring to your defense. I think Burnham projects as sort of a Mike Will. I think Tuihalamaka projects as more of a Mike. So when you look at him, I like that combination. Ziegler's more of an outside player, a rover, a Will kind of player. And then if you're able to land those two guys, which I think they lead, I also think Notre Dame leads for Sebastian Cheeks, although that one is still a down-the-road thing. From talking to one of my sources last night, it sounds like he wants to wait until after he plays his junior season, which is supposed to be this spring if they have football in Illinois. So he wants to commit before his senior year, but we need to see kind of that progress a little bit. So I really like that group. And then there's Devin Jackson from Nebraska, from the same high school as Xavier Watts. He's an interesting player. I've got to watch more film of him. Here's my thoughts on Devin Jackson. I think he is an exceptional athlete, and I think he is a guy that you recruit just because of his athleticism alone. But here's my problem. He's more of an edge rusher right now, and we don't really see him do a lot of linebacker things. At least we didn't on sophomore film. He didn't get a chance to play as a junior because for some reason, even though most of Nebraska played football, his particular district did not allow them to play football last year. So I need to see him do some linebacker things. I love the athleticism, and the problem is he's not really a drop linebacker because I don't think he necessarily has the size to be a drop linebacker. So I need to see how he fills out. I need to see him play linebacker. If Notre Dame decides to take him, there's some risk there. I think there's a lower floor with Devin Jackson, but it would also be a pick that I wouldn't have a problem with because there's a very high ceiling with this kid. I think there's a lot of athleticism. There's a lot of twitchiness there. There's a lot of explosiveness there. If they think they can get him to fill out, or if they think he can play linebacker, then you do it. And if you do take Jackson and he can't play linebacker every down, at the very least, you have a guy that can be an edge rusher in a nickel package. I mean, and I think Marcus Freeman's going to be using sub packages a little bit more than we saw from Clark Lee. So I think that is a situation where you're going to at least get value from him, even if he can't pan out as an every down linebacker. So I think right now Notre Dame is in great position when it comes to 2022 linebacker recruiting. Brandon Plencher says, let's see here, just went away. Love Burnham. Hope he commits soon. Needs to come visit. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if he's going to commit anytime soon. I've heard some rumblings from a couple different sources that he may decide by the end of the month, but I know Michigan right now is trying to keep him from making a decision because I think they know that if he made a decision right now, it may not work out well for them. So they're just trying to get him to not make a decision and hold off. So I love where Notre Dame is at right now when it comes to linebacker recruiting. They've got themselves with some top players. Jalen Sneed is a top 50 recruit, in my opinion. He likes Notre Dame. Harold Perkins is a 5-star recruit. He likes Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. There's a lot of players to choose from at linebacker. Now, the key now is going to be Coach Freeman has to close, and that's going to be the next step for Notre Dame. So I like where they're at. I think that's a great place, and that, to me, from a combination of volume plus talent, I think is the most important position in the 2022 class. Now, you could argue they need a top corner. I get that. But they don't have a need for numbers at corner. They signed 3 corners in 2020. They signed 4 in 2021. Notre Dame is good from a number standpoint at corner. They just need a high-level player. Toriano Pride, Jaden Gould, guys like that. I think they need an impact talent, not so much numbers. I think at linebacker, it's both. You need numbers and you need top-level talent. So far, they're in position to get that, but now they have to go out and finish and get it. All right, Samuel Ramirez says, Notre Dame is in great position in linebacker recruiting with Cheeks, Jackson, Burnham, and Tuihalamaka. If you could only take 3 to play with Ziegler, who would you pick and why? That kind of follows up on my question, my thing from earlier. If I could only take 3 of them, I would take Cheeks, Burnham, and Tuihalamaka. And the reason for that is, even though you could make a case that Jackson's the best athlete of all of them, the reason I would take the other 3 is because I know those guys can play linebacker. I'm still not sold that Jackson can. So if I had to pick, and again, at some point in time in recruiting, you have to pick. You have a lot of players you really like. You can only take so many. Those would be the 3 that I would take. Would I criticize Notre Dame for taking Jackson? Absolutely not, because I get it. I see the athleticism. It's impressive. And he's a highly ranked kid. So if they took him and they wanted to take a chance and a flyer on his athleticism, go for it. But for me, when I have multiple talented players on the board, I want to take the guys that I feel more comfortable being able to play at that position, more certainty playing at that position. Now, would I take a guy that I thought was an average talent but knew how to play the linebacker position over Jackson? No way. The only reason I'm saying I wouldn't take Jackson is because I think the other 3 guys that you mentioned are all top 100 caliber talents as well. And again, I'm not talking about how they're ranked. They are ranked that way. I'm talking about how I see their talent. To me, they're top 100 caliber talents on my grading scale. So there's a similarity between all of them. So to me, you take the guys that have more certainty at that position. But again, it's one of those things where you're picking between really, really good prospects, and I don't think there's a wrong answer. I hope, Samuel, that kind of answers your question, because yes, I would take this 3, but the way I also view it is I don't think there's a wrong trio that Notre Dame could take of that group. And then if you throw Jalen Sneed and you throw in Harold Perkins, literally, I'm at the position where if you're asking me to pick my top 3, I could tell you what my top 3 are. But there's not a guy that they could take in any combination, any 3 combination of those guys that I'd look at and say anything but great pickup. Tommy Leonard asked, does that junior stand for Manti Jr. when talking about Tuihalamaka goes by Junior Tuihalamaka? No, but it could. He certainly has a lot of skills. I think the Manti comparisons are really on point, just because body type wise, Manti wasn't a real tall guy, but had good length. Manti was a real thick guy. I think Junior's a real thick guy. I think both of them are incredibly instinctive. Here's the thing I like about Junior Tuihalamaka on film. he is a 6'1.5", 230+ pound kid who's got a really thick body. But the thing that makes him unique, and this is what separates the great linebackers from the good linebackers, is not only does he have talent and tools and all that, but his ability to kind of get through little narrow holes is unique. And Manti had that, especially as he got older, where you're like, how'd that big-bodied guy get through that little hole? Because it's instincts, it's timing, it's technique, it's athleticism. And so he is a natural linebacker. And he's just a really talented player and a guy that I think is going to draw a lot of Manti Te'o comparisons. Normally, I try to avoid those, and I would avoid them in regards to predicting that Junior is going to go out and be a Heisman Trophy finalist and have 7 interceptions. But if you're just talking about sort of a comparing their skill set, then I think that there's a lot of natural similarities. Stadium rankings as who's Notre Dame's biggest threat to Tuihalamaka? I would argue Texas. And the reason I say that is I think Notre Dame leads for him, and I'd be a little surprised if he doesn't pick Notre Dame. But it's not a done deal because he's not publicly committed at this point in time. I think that it's not going to be Stanford. I'd be shocked if it's Stanford. I think it's going to be because I don't think he really cares about staying close to home. I think it's about Texas right now is a really hot program on the recruiting trail. And since they brought in the new staff, they have made him a big priority. And I always worry about the latecomers that have a really unique product to sell. And when you look at Texas right now, it's a brand new staff. There's literally no criticism you can make of the job they've done at Texas. Their new head coach just won a national championship, turning Mac Jones into a first-round talent, right? So they're a hot program, and we saw this with Brian Kelly in his first year. I mean, you look at the 2011 class; they signed 3 5-star defensive ends his first full class, and that was after Notre Dame had gone 8-5. Imagine what it's like for a guy like Steve Sarkisian who hasn't coached a game yet, and the success he had was great. So that's, to me, would be the program that I'd be most concerned with right now. I don't know if that's considered what other people would predict, but based on what I know of the situation and just how I know recruiting goes, I think that would be the team that I would be most concerned about. Brandon Plencher asks, would they take Snead with 4 linebackers already committed? Brandon, I you know what? I think I don't know what the staff would do. Here's the issue that you have. You have to juggle what your needs are at other positions because you can only take so many players. Notre Dame is going to have to get back to 85 unless the NCAA changes and gives. So right now, these schools are in a unique situation. In 2021, they can have as many scholarship players as they want. Because of the COVID year of eligibility they granted, that's why Kurt Hinish can come back. So there is no scholarship limit. As of right now, the plan is going to be that by 2022, so just 1 year, you have to be back down to 85. There are some trying to push for the NCAA to kind of slowly walk it back a little bit. So maybe you're at 90 in 2022, then get to 85, something like that. If the NCAA makes a rule allowing them to be at 90, then yeah, you load up. But right now, there's a lot of uncertainty about that. And there are other positions where volume is needed. Now, let's just say Notre Dame gets in a situation where they get a corner and a safety they really like, and they feel like maybe one of the current corners can move to safety and be a starting caliber player. So they say, hey, look, we're only going to take 2 DBs in this class because we've loaded up the last couple of years of corner. We signed 2 safeties last year. We're going to move one of those corners over, something along those lines. And they wanted to use one of those positions to go to linebacker. Then I'd say you have that conversation. Let's say that they wanted to take 3 receivers, but right now receiver recruiting isn't looking great. So do you take 3 good players, or because you missed out on all the best players, which is what it's looking like right now, unless things change? Or do you say, look, we're not going to meet our need. We didn't get it done in recruiting receivers this year, so we're only going to take 2. And that's going to allow us to at least be good numbers-wise. We'll take one of those receiver scholarships and put it towards next year, but then we'll use that 3rd scholarship we had allotted for there, and we'll move it to linebacker because we feel we can load up. That's the first thing you have to look at. The second thing you have to look at in a situation like this, Brandon, is can you play all these guys together? I mean, if you take 5 linebackers that can only play Mike or Buck, then you've wasted some scholarships because you're not going to play 5 inside linebackers week after week, not in one class. So then you say, well, can guys play different positions? Okay, can Nolan Ziegler be a rover? Can Jalen Snead be a rover? Can Junior Tuihalamaka maybe eventually move to drop end if you feel the need there? So if you have at least 2 or 3 of those guys that can be versatile, let's say you take Devin Jackson, for example, and maybe he grows into that drop position, or maybe you like to use him more of an edge rusher than a pure linebacker, then you may say, we'll take that extra guy because that we have enough versatility that you can use all these guys together. That's how I would look at it. And I think the final piece of that would be, we still don't know what Marcus Freeman ultimately wants to do on defense. We know, I'm confident in saying that in 2021, we're going to see more of a 4-2-5 alignment because he's going to build around what's already there. I'm curious to see if ultimately he may not want to be more of a 3-3-5. If you go to more of a 3-3-5, then now you can play more true linebackers. And now a guy like Jalen Sneed, guys like Nolan Ziegler become even more important because they're genuine hybrid linebackers that can play in space and cover and do things like that, from the same cloth as a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Not saying they're as good as or athletic or anything like that. I'm simply saying their style of play is similar. So with guys like Jalen Sneed and Nolan Ziegler, you could go with a 3-3-5 stack where you've got 3 defensive linemen and then 3 linebackers stacked right behind them, and you've got 3 pure linebackers. But that third linebacker, that Sam linebacker, has to be capable of playing in the slot, playing outside, dropping into coverage, and doing things along those lines. So because in the 3-3-5, the way that Marcus Freeman did it at Cincinnati, that rover is no longer a rover. It's more of a safety. And so if they get to that point, so maybe you'd have 3 linebackers, then like a Kerry G playing that spot or something like that. I think those are some things that you would have to look at and say, okay, that's kind of where you are. And you feel like you got another guy and you can use those guys together, then you can, if you can make it work numbers wise at other places, then you make it work. So, here's a defensive question. I did not see this, Maddie. I'm sorry. How good on the scale of average to elite, in your opinion, could the linebacker class be in 2022 if we get some of the linebackers we've offered? If Notre Dame signs 3 to 4 of the linebackers that we've talked about in this show, so that is obviously Nolan Ziegler's already in the class. It's a big pickup. He's a top 200 caliber player. Junior Tuihalamaka, Sebastian Cheeks, Josh Burnham, Jalen Sneed, Harold Perkins, Sean Murphy. Those are the guys that I kind of look as like the guys you'd take right now. If they get any 3 to 4 man combination of any of those linebackers, that I don't think there's going to be a team in the country that's going to have a better linebacker class. That is an elite linebacker class. I would argue that's even better than the 2018 linebacker class, which at the time coming out of high school was an outstanding linebacker class. You had Jack Lamb, who was a top 100 recruit. You had Shane Simon, who was a top 100 recruit. Bo Bauer was a top 200 recruit. And then you had Ovia Gofu, who ended up being a defensive end. This would be the best linebacker class of the Brian Kelly era, and I don't think it would be close. That's how, and I'm not even talking about just recruiting rankings. From a recruiting ranking standpoint, it would be. Most of those guys are top 100 players. I'm simply looking at it from evaluating the film. If you get any combination of those 3 or 4 guys, this is as good of a linebacker class as you're going to get, and there's versatility there too. It's not 4 guys that are just play the same position. It would be a really, really good linebacker class.